It wasn't a minority at Anfield yesterday. The boos were loud, and it did take me by surprise.
I think all of us maintained, well, that won't happen at Anfield, but it did.
I think it's a little bit distasteful. I think it's unfair.
I would never boo Trent Alexander-Arnold. When you think about what he's given to that football club.
He's won all there is to win. He's going to join the biggest football club in the world. Yes, Liverpool fans can feel aggrieved there isn't a transfer fee. I don't think that's necessarily all Trent Alexander-Arnold's fault. I think probably Liverpool left it a bit too late to start negotiating.
That will stick in players' mind. People will remember that.
A lot of players, when they think about their decision-making, will start to think about themselves rather than love for the club, because they'll have seen from that we work in a fickle industry.
And I also think it had an impact on the result as well, because Liverpool were cruising. And I think it created an unwanted sideshow that probably stopped Liverpool winning the game.
I'm delighted to say Darren Lewis is here alongside me and the Crookmeister for Premier League All Access. Good morning to you both. Are you well? Has everybody had an exciting weekend watching football?
I can't say mine was that exciting. Southampton 0, Manchester City 0. Ruben Diaz not happy with that game, and he'd have been even less happy if he was at Adams Park on Sunday afternoon. Wickham 0, Charlton 0. Probably the worst game of football I've ever seen.
All to play for, though, Crook. All to play for in the second leg of that semi-final of the playoffs. Well, I mean, obviously, Darren, you've had a much more healthy football weekend.
I have indeed. Liverpool 2, Arsenal 2, terrific game, title in the bag. Yeah, they let the 2-goal lead drop, but it doesn't really matter. I think all the planning is for the summer. I think everyone can get their flip-flops out. I know you're going to talk about Trent. That was a little bit sad, but otherwise, a really nice weekend.
Okay, good. I'm pleased for you. Pleased you had a good weekend. I went to Newcastle, Chelsea. So you could imagine my mood afterwards. Crook had to put up with me talking at him on the phone for about 20 minutes and ranting about Chelsea's performance. But instead of just leaving that exclusively to a car conversation, let's bring it to life. Let's start with that all-important race for the top 5, because that is what everyone is talking about. Well, let's start at Chelsea, because they dropped points away at Newcastle United. In fact, Newcastle got a terrific record against those who are also fighting for a European place. And St James's Park was bubbling yesterday lunchtime. They've got a habit, Darren Lewis, of blitzing teams right from the very off. And Chelsea were outfoxed, I think, by the change of formation that Eddie Howe employed in this game. They're actually behind the 8 ball before Nicholas Jackson was sent off. Who's that on? Was it on the manager or the players for not adapting to the level of intensity, which I think we all knew was coming from Newcastle?
I think it was on the manager, and in a way, it's on the club as well. I looked at Sunday's result. I think if you're going into a match this big, you have to want it. The stakes are so high, you have to want it. And Newcastle wanted it more. Now, the manager's got to prime his players. That's literally his job, to be ready to go from the off. But the club, I say, are at fault, because you cannot spend that amount of money and go into such a crucial game with so little firepower. And once Nicholas Jackson was sent off, that was your game over.
And that was an issue, wasn't it? And you and I sort of just talked about this last night, Crook. The fact is that when Nicholas Jackson is in the team, they don't have an alternative. I mean, their alternative is Christopher Nkunku, who's perennially injured and hasn't really settled at Chelsea anyway. And then you've got Mark Guiu, who's still a teenager and isn't likely to be able to hold his place in a Premier League team anyway, because he's still very young and hasn't had much football. So actually, when you look at the way the squad has been built, it hasn't really been built for this sort of scenario, right at the business end of the season, needing to put results on the board. I thought they played better in the second half, actually, when they were down to 10 men, when they were sort of desperate and they were going for it. They made a few tactical tweaks and it did work. But Eddie Howe then readjusted his team as a result, brought in Emil Kraft and just shored things up. And then they just managed to keep Chelsea at arm's length. They did have a couple of good chances. Fernandes had a good chance. James had a really good chance. Cucurella forced Pope into a save. But really and truly, Newcastle, I think, over the course of the 90 minutes, deserved the victory.
It's a fundamental flaw with a business model. If you're gonna spend £1 billion on the squad, you need a proven number 9. You need a goalkeeper that you can rely upon, not just to make saves, but to play the ball out from the back, as Maresca obviously wants to do, and Robert Sanchez is lacking in that department. But you also need leadership. And Newcastle just look more streetwise to me. The likes of Bruno Guimaraes in midfield. You mentioned Emil Kraft coming on just to stabilise defensively their experienced player. When Chelsea were trying to apply the pressure, Chelsea don't have that capability. They don't have enough experience in the squad. They don't have enough leaders. It's looked like Cole Palmer was sulking again, not for the first time this season. And without Nicholas Jackson, their only option, it seems now, up front for the final games of the campaign is Pedro Neto. Now, that'll probably be enough against Manchester United on Friday night, but I'm not sure that'll be enough against Nuno Espirito Santo's wily Forest side on the final day of the season. So I think for Newcastle, brilliant result. They'll go on and cement themselves in the top 5. For Chelsea, I think they've got it all to do.
Interesting, Darren, because it's crucial for Chelsea to get into the top 5 because PSR, because of budgets, because they've budgeted to be in the Champions League. We know that Todd Bowley didn't realise that when he first came into the club that you wouldn't be in the Champions League every single season. I mean, I don't know if that's an urban myth or not, but there was that great story about them going through the lines of the accounts and they couldn't understand why there was no 100 million quid from the Champions League in one particular year. And someone said to him, well, it's because we didn't qualify for it. And he had to sort of get a little bit of an education. That might not be 100% true. It was just what I was told. Everyone tells me it is true, but I don't know. I'm hoping it's not. I really am. But anyway,
it's like Newcastle, one of those headlines you put a question mark on the end of, so you can get away with saying it.
Yeah, it's a bit like that. Yeah, Darren, Newcastle need it too, though, right? Because they want to be able to get into the Champions League not only for the prestige of the competition, but mainly because they will need the revenue to retain and recruit their best players.
Yeah, they do need that for all those reasons. But you know what? They are achieving their goals. They are doing what they need to do. Why? Because they've bought well, the squad is deep, and they've got the quality. And they are the opposite of Chelsea, which, for my money now, is a business model club. That you mentioned the alternatives that you have for Jackson, and they're players that are going to mature and they will get better and they'll eventually be sold and they'll recoup their investment and then they'll reinvest in another couple of young players. And that, you've got to decide, pick a struggle. Either you want to be in the Champions League and you want to have a competitive side capable of going into a kind of footballing game of snakes and ladders behind Liverpool, or you want to make money. You want to get players that are young and they've got promise and they'll play well and they'll be able, you can sell them for 4, 5, 6 times what you bought them for, and you can obviously bank the profits. But you cannot do what Chelsea are trying to do and believe that you can finish in the top 5 ahead of better equipped teams. Villa have got more firepower and they've got a good defensive record. Newcastle have got more firepower and they've got the wherewithal, as they did on Sunday, to set up to stop your only big threat, which is Cole Palmer. Once Jackson, of course, went off, Arsenal got a terrific defensive record, the best in the Premier League, and Manchester City, they've got the firepower. They slipped up, but they've got the firepower. I don't know what Chelsea offer this fight now going forward, given that Jackson's no longer going to be in there. But Newcastle, they look terrific. And I think as far as Eddie Howe is concerned, that's good management. Primed them ready to run for their lives right from the off. And that's what they did.
I think over the last 21 games, Liverpool have taken 1 more point than Newcastle United, which I think shows you how impressive they have been at the end of the season. Chelsea were 2nd in December. Newcastle were 12th in December. But Newcastle United have had such a brilliant second half of the campaign. And Eddie Howe had this conversation with the players. The players had a conversation amongst themselves after they lost against Brentford. 4-2 at the beginning of December, and they said, what sort of club do we want to be? What sort of team do we want to be? Do we want to be a team that just about gets through the season, does okay, or do we want to achieve something here? They had an honest, robust discussion in the dressing room after that game, and since then, they have been absolutely flying. And they deserve, the players, the management, everybody at that football club deserves, and the fans. The fans have been terrific, by the way. They create such a great atmosphere before every single game. They deserve a hell of a lot of credit, all of them, the whole club.
Yeah, and what he also did after that Brentford game was he obviously reconfigured the formation and that midfield combination. I think has been absolutely key to what Newcastle have achieved. The atmosphere, listening to your commentary in the car yesterday, sounded absolutely top draw. And I think it wasn't just the Newcastle players that blitzed Chelsea early on. I think the fans did as well. War Flags deserve a lot of credit for helping with that atmosphere. He's not really been talked about in these terms, but I think there's a case for Eddie Howe as manager of the season. He's won the League Cup. He's put a trophy in the cabinet for Newcastle for the first time in decades. He's going to get them in the top 5. They might finish second, by the way, Newcastle. Yeah. It's not beyond the realms of fantasy. They finish as Premier League runners-up. And Darren Lewis is scoffing because obviously Arne Slot's done a wonderful job. But you have to look at every achievement in context. And to me, winning a cup and finishing in the top 5 for Newcastle is just as big an achievement as Liverpool winning the Premier League title when the champions have taken the year off.
I think when you haven't had 70 years without a trophy and you have managed to get your team into the Champions League, when that is not something that they do regularly, I think he deserves a hell of a lot of credit. I'm not necessarily saying that he should be the manager of the year, but I'm with Crook that there is a case for it. You can make a case for it because he has been so terrific and they have been so terrific. I understand that Arne Slot has done an amazing job. You've heard me praise him on this podcast. You've heard me praise the hierarchy of Liverpool, Richard Hughes and Michael Edwards, for hiring him because they were the ones who spotted this guy that no one was talking about in February and March last year after we knew that Jurgen Klopp was leaving. Everyone was talking about Xabi Alonso, and he's delivered. He's delivered superbly. But Eddie Howe has done a fantastic job, and he does deserve consideration, I think, Darren.
Darren is ready to explode. Arms are
Go on,
folded.
Darren. Explode, Darren. Explode.
No, listen. Eddie Howe has done a superb job at Newcastle. There is no doubt about it. There's no equivocation at all. He has had the time to be able to do it, to build a squad, to build a relationship with that fan base, to fall short and come again this time around in terms of winning silverware. And so he's had that time to get his feet under the table. Arne Slot has not. And we have seen in Premier League history just how hard it is to follow legends. And you look at Arsenal, you look at Manchester United, you look at the problems United have had and still have since the departure of Sir Alex Ferguson. And then you compare that to Liverpool, where a legend, a behemoth of the game has gone in Jurgen Klopp. And along comes this guy who, let's not kid ourselves, outside of the purists, few people had heard of. And he's come into the toughest league in the world, and he's won the league by a street. I think the record points total in victory is 19 points, and he's heading for that at the moment. The idea that you would give anyone else but him the Manager of the Year award is just crazy.
I think you're right to point out his achievements, but where did he take over the team? They were third last year. They were at one stage last year. People were talking about a quadruple, right, for Liverpool. He's taken over a very good team. When Eddie Howe took over Newcastle, they were 19th on the 8th of November, the 2021, when he walked in the door. Yeah, it may have taken him a little more time to get things sorted, but he needed that time to organise it. They're coming from two different platforms. I'm not necessarily saying that Arne Slot's achievements shouldn't be appreciated. I'm saying they should be. He wins the Manager of the Year for me. But I don't think that Eddie Howe and his case is that far behind.
No. I wouldn't argue that. You're absolutely right. I wouldn't argue that Eddie Howe's case is that far behind. But you've just given the explanation yourself. Eddie Howe took over Newcastle in 2021. He has had the time to be able to build towards winning a trophy and getting them into the Champions League. we've seen a lot in football history, top managers take over successful teams and fail. Rafa Benitez went to Inter Milan when they'd won the treble, the Champions League, the domestic cup, and the Italian title. He was sacked by November because he couldn't engender the same camaraderie at the club that Jose Mourinho had. And I think sometimes when it looks easy, it's because that person who's managed to make it look easy is good at it. And that's what Slot has done. And you cannot take away from that as good a job as Eddie Howe has done.
Should we talk a little bit about Liverpool then? Because they drew 2-2 yesterday with Arsenal. But the big story, obviously, is the reaction to Trent Alexander-Arnold. Crook has been sitting here on this podcast in studios with me saying, look, the reaction has been bad on social media. The reaction's been bad on YouTube, with some people suggesting that he should never play for the club again, and all sorts of other rather extreme reactions. But I think all of us maintained, well, that won't happen at Anfield, but it did, Crook.
Yeah, and it surprised me because I was at Leicester when he came on and obviously scored what proved to be a decisive goal in the title race. And even before he scored, the reaction from the away fans was very positive. There certainly weren't any audible boos, quite the opposite. But it wasn't a minority at Anfield yesterday. The boos were loud, and it did take me by surprise. It's a difficult one because I'm not a Liverpool fan. Darren is, so he can speak as a Liverpool fan and maybe try and explain the reaction. But I do think it's a reflection of where we are as a society at this moment in time. It's an angry world that we live in, and I think Trent Alexander-Arnold probably has felt the brunt of that. I think it's unfair. I think this is someone who has spent 20 years at his boyhood club. He's won all there is to win. He's going to join the biggest football club in the world, and it pains me to say that as a Manchester United supporter, but that's what Real Madrid are. Yes, Liverpool fans can feel aggrieved there isn't a transfer fee. I don't think that's necessarily all Trent Alexander-Arnold's fault. I think probably Liverpool left it a bit too late to start negotiating a contract, and by the time Richard Hughes and Michael Edwards were in situ in the summer, his mind was already made up. And from what I'm told, he and his camp have handled his departure with respect. There's no animosity from the Liverpool hierarchy to Trent or vice versa. So I think on a day that should have been the celebration of the newly crowned champions, they were given a guard of honour before kickoff. I think it's a little bit distasteful that we come away talking about Liverpool fans booing one of their own.
Darren Lewis.
Listen, I think Alex makes a number of good points, and you know me, I like a good argument, but I can't really argue with much of what he has said.
So you didn't boo yesterday when you were there? Is that what you're saying?
I didn't boo. I would never boo Trent Alexander-Arnold. When you think about what he's given to that football club, when you think about the fact that he has his after academy on Merseyside to give an opportunity to players who didn't make it in the game, when you think about the respect and the love he has for the club, the temperament that he's managed to maintain despite all the criticism that he has had throughout his time there, the times when he's continued to perform, even when people, despite what he'd won, would talk about what he couldn't do rather than what he could. The saddest thing about Sunday is that I think a lot of players, when they think about their decision-making, will start to think about themselves rather than love for the club, because they'll have seen from that we work in a fickle industry where you can do all that Trent has done and still, in the eyes of some people, be committing a heresy if you exercise your right to advance your career in the way that you see fit. And Alex is also right about this being an indictment of our society, because not just in terms of the way, in general terms, society has gone, but also, we have influencers who are saying how bad Trent has been for just making a decision that benefits him and his family. And then on the other hand, turning around and saying, oh my goodness, isn't it terrible that Trent was booed, when they played a part in it as well. And I see so many of them now making capital from that, when we've fermented this angry atmosphere for a player to play, and when all he's ever done is love their club and do what he can to win 2 titles and the Champions League for them. So I'm not, I'm not condemning Liverpool. I'm just saying how sad I feel this whole situation is as far as he's concerned. And he'll go somewhere where he'll be loved and he'll be appreciated, and from afar, um, he will be a good fit for a team who needs his quality in that position.
I think if you take it out of the football context and apply a dose of sort of normal life to the equation, Trent Alexander-Arnold has got a new job. He's going to get more dosh. He's going to enjoy more sunshine and better weather and probably have an easier life because the workload isn't as grueling where he is going. If it was your mate Barry from IT in Barclays and he was heading to Santander, you'd throw him a big party, slap him on the back and say, "You're lucky so-and-so, you." But football lives and breathes in a slightly different world. It has emotion and passion at its core. It can be a bit of a pantomime at times. And I think we probably, if we're honest about it, know that only half of those people that reacted on Sunday actually really mean it viscerally. It was a bit of a pack mentality thing. It's a game within a game in a sense as well. Yeah, of course there's hurt. Of course there's upset. And fans feel they have the right to express themselves because they pay so much money. They dedicate a lot of their lives to the football club. They get names on back, which costs a lot of money. By the way, you buy a shirt at the beginning of the season with Trent Alexander-Arnold on it. Right? It costs a lot of money. It's an investment being a football fan. But would I have booed him? No, I wouldn't have done, because I think he's made a brilliant decision for his family and he's done everything he can for Liverpool. But I'm not a Liverpool fan. I don't feel it like that. And I'm sure that half the people that booed yesterday don't feel it like that either. They're just involved in the moment and it's all a little bit of a game. But I do think for him, and going forward actually, Darren is absolutely right. That will stick in players' mind. That people will remember that when they're thinking about how they make their decisions going forward. I don't know whether that's a triumph for the fans because they're planting seeds for further transfer negotiations, or it's something to be concerned about.
And I also think it had an impact on the result as well, because Liverpool were cruising, 2-0 up. Obviously, Arsenal ended up with 10 men, and I think it created an unwanted sideshow that probably stopped Liverpool winning the game. And it'll be interesting to see how Arne Slot plays it from here on in. Will he pick Trent for the final game of the season when they get the Premier League title against Crystal Palace? It's an interesting conundrum for the manager.
It taints it for him as well, doesn't it? Because he's won the title with his boyhood club. The first time it happened, he didn't get to celebrate with the supporters. This time, he doesn't really get to celebrate with the supporters because they don't want him to celebrate it with them. So it's not a great situation for him, and I do feel a little bit sorry for him, I have to say. Right, okay, let's turn our attention to another big story from the weekend, because Nottingham Forest dropped points at home to Leicester. I don't think many people saw that coming. But the main story here, Darren, is Marinakis confronting Nuno Espirito Santo after the 2-2 draw. This was quite extraordinary, and the genesis of it was a miscommunication between the coaching staff and the medical team in regard to Taiwo Awoniyi's injury. Look, clearly they want to be in the Champions League, but they've just qualified for Europe for the first time since, I can't even remember when, the middle of the 90s. It's an odd way to celebrate.
It was. It was. I mean, the thing is, I'm going to give you my view now, and then I'm going to give you a private view that was expressed to me, right?
Okay, go for it. This is good.
I could see, I could understand. My overall view is yes, I agree with you. If you're going to be upset, do it away from the glare of the cameras and the world. This is a global game. We watch, we cover, we enjoy, and to embarrass your manager like that was just not on. The flip side of it, which was put to me, and I can get it in a way. Some fans feel that there's a perception that, well, you're going to be in Europe anyway, stay in your lane. You'd just be satisfied with the Europa League. And in a way, I say, why should Forest just be satisfied with a place in the Europa League? Why can they not be frustrated, angry at not beating one of the worst teams in the Premier League? Why can they not allow that emotion to bubble over when you consider that they had been in those places for so long. And you mentioned Barry from accounts, and if he was having his leaving do anywhere. Well, if the CEO of Barry's company had seen Barry's company underperforming on a consistent basis, eventually he might come down to the shop floor to find out what's going on. And so I can see that argument as well in terms of Marinakis. We do like our pantomime figures in football, and he's been painted in that way. But I've seen a lot of poor things. And, again, put to me, what is the difference between Marinakis doing that and some of the clubs that have sacked managers like Van Gaal and Ten Hag and, the journalists and everybody else has known about it before they've known about it? What's the difference between that? Martin Jol sacked at Spurs. Everybody knows about that before he does. Is there any real difference in the conduct? Because we can see Marinakis, but we can't see those executives who hide behind in the shadows. That's their view, yeah. And so I'm trying to be a little bit even-handed with the analysis of this. But my personal view is that if you're going to be angry, do it away from the cameras and give your manager a chance to retain his credibility with your dressing room.
Well, Gary Neville said that Nuno Espirito Santo should negotiate his exit tonight. Clearly, it appears that his authority is undermined. Does it give us a sort of window, actually, into how difficult it is to work at Nottingham Forest and give you a bit of renewed respect for Nuno Espirito Santo, who handled the situation, I thought, with class?
Yeah, he did, and it's not the first time that Marinakis has made himself centre of attention. We all remember the tweets from the official Nottingham Forest account, accusing referees of wrongdoing that clearly, he just typed out and stuck on there himself. So we shouldn't be surprised. I think it's a poor look, bearing in mind the season that Nottingham Forest have had. And if you'd have told Marinakis at the start of the season that they'd be qualifying for Europe, regardless of whether it's only, in inverted commas, the Europa League or Conference League, he would have bit your hand off for that. But the other side of the coin, there's a lot of people who own football clubs who don't have the same passion and the same desire that Marinakis clearly does. I'd love it if the Glazers cared enough to storm onto the pitch at Old Trafford after Manchester United lose at home to West Ham. They don't. So I don't think you'll find too many Nottingham Forest fans who are going to attack the owner who's given them the best days for a generation.
And I suppose he certainly knows that it makes a difference if you get into the Champions League or the Europa League in terms of money. He won't be going through the accounts and going, £100 million, do we get that every single year? Not saying that happened at Chelsea, though, I'm just saying that it's a rumour. Victory here would have lifted Nottingham Forest above Aston Villa and Chelsea into fifth place, but they never really appeared comfortable all afternoon. It's now 3 matches at the City Ground without a victory now, and a crucial stage of the season. It's no longer in their hands, but they do have Chelsea on the final day of the season, Darren Lewis. And the City Ground will have to, and maybe this will help, actually. Maybe it will sharpen everybody's focus going into that final game of the campaign. And of course, they have another game away from home before that when they go to the London Stadium to play an inconsistent but much better yesterday, West Ham United.
Yeah, West Ham will winners because Man United was so poor, but you just don't know what West Ham will turn up from week to week. So I could see Forest maybe seeing an opportunity there. I can't see anything other than a Forest win against Chelsea because Chelsea are so toothless. And if Forest set up, as Newcastle did on Sunday, with that 5 across the middle and to snuff out the attentions of Palmer, I can't really see who else steps up for Chelsea. So I can see a scenario where they get the 3 points. The problem is the form that both are showing now. I just wonder if neither will be in that top 5. And Villa, who are up against both Europa League finalists, I wonder if they might leapfrog them because those Europa League final teams are going to be more and more weakened the closer and closer we get to the actual final itself. And that will hand an opportunity to Villa to make it past the other two.
Okay, let's see what happened with Aston Villa because they went to Bournemouth on Saturday evening, the Sunshine South Coast, and they just about escaped with all 3 points. But might that be enough to take them into the Champions League? Well, the only goal of the game came from Ollie Watkins, a little nifty touch at the near post, and it means, Alex Crook, that he moves ahead of Gabby Agbonlahor as Villa's record Premier League goal scorer. Gabby, I think, said to me that he was going to be at the Vitality Stadium in the home end with a pink gin. I'm not necessarily sure that was true or not, but he did say they do doubles at the Vitality Stadium. What did you make of the game, Crook? Because this is a key moment for Aston Villa and also for Bournemouth too, who have just sort of faltered towards the end of the season.
He was at the game, Gabby, and there was quite a funny moment as I was driving back from St Mary's that they got him on the phone at half-time from the stadium as his record had gone. He took it in good jest, in fairness, but it was really good radio.
That would have been the pink gin.
I think Villa deserved it. I think they were the better team. There's a lot of Bournemouth fans actually who are quite frustrated with their home form since the turn of the year. But we're seeing a lot of these type of games, aren't we? And we saw it when Villa played Fulham. They get the early goal and then they just sort of see out the game out. There's obviously a lot of anxiety because of what's at stake. I think we saw it to a certain extent at St James's Park when Newcastle, even against 10 men, did struggle a little bit to put the game to bed. I think they were trying to manage it more than anything else. But I agree with Darren. I think this feels like a really significant win for Villa. They'll beat Tottenham on Friday night live on talkSPORT. So, I mean, no doubt about that. And whatever happens in the Europa League final, United will either be still drunk in celebration mode, or they'll be down in the dumps. So they'll beat United as well. So I think Villa are going to end the season with maximum points, and that should be enough to get them in the top 5, particularly with Chelsea travelling to Forest on the last day of the season. For Bournemouth, I fear they might miss out. You look at the form that Brentford have strung together. Brighton have picked up some important results of late as well. That was a good win for them against an informed Wolves side. Bournemouth to finish 10th in the table would be a heck of achievement, but maybe not enough to get European football. And maybe it's a little bit early in their development anyway.
Interestingly, Manchester United are full of professional footballers and shouldn't be characterised in the Alex Crook manner of I'm getting absolutely blitzed if we win on Wednesday night. However, I will be so depressed I probably won't even turn up for the game on Sunday should we lose. They will still be there. So Aston Villa have a job to do.
They've not been there in the Premier League since December.
All right, just chill. Darren, Aston Villa are in a good situation, but it might have been different had Tyrone Mings had been sent off. And there was some suggestion, I know the pundits on Match of the Day were sort of divided on this, but I was watching it and I thought, I can't believe that hasn't been looked at by the VAR, because Tyrone Mings fractures the jaw of Alex Scott. And that is the definition of endangering the safety of an opponent. And I couldn't believe, having seen Nicholas Jackson sent off on Sunday, that hadn't been applied on Saturday night as well.
Yeah, I think you make a good point. And I think Mings will be really fortunate. He'll feel really fortunate to have got away with it. The more you look at it, the worse it looks. And even though you want to be even-handed and fair about it, there's no doubt about the fact that his arm is raised at a height inconsistent with a movement towards the ball. Inconsistent with the movement towards the ball that he makes. And I just think as far as Nicholas Jackson is concerned, he'll be aggrieved to have been sent off when maybe that one looked a little bit more obvious. I've got a feeling we haven't heard the last of that one.
Oh, really? Interesting. So you think that it might all be looked at by the FA and then they might phone up and say, I'm sorry, Tyrone, you're going to be banned for the next 2 games?
Yeah, I mean, he didn't get a yellow card for it, as I recall, did he?
No.
Yeah, so that could mean that they look into it. I mean, it's been shown a lot since the weekend. Now, listen, there's no suggestion that Tyrone's done it with any intent. But then I always say this, we're not mind readers, we're football reporters. And we can only go on the evidence of what we see. And as you said, the rules do legislate for endangering the safety of an opponent. If the opponent's got a fractured jaw, then I think the
safety has been endangered.
Indeed.
Quite frankly.
Indeed.
It felt a bit sorry for Alex Scott, because not only did he have that whack from Tyrone Mings, he then got another one as well, which I think just made sure that the jaw was definitely fractured, which is not a great thing to have, is it? I mean, that's a painful situation. I saw him go up to the physio and say, it's popped out, So, look, good luck to him. I hope he gets better soon because he's a lovely little player when he's on top form. That defeat ended Bournemouth's 5-game unbeaten run. But I think the problem is with that unbeaten run, a lot of drawn games in that. And also just since the back end of January, they just have dipped at the wrong time. And Andoni Iraola, who was absolutely, always is very polite afterwards and very sort of sanguine about the situation, saying, we'll keep going. But they've got a couple of tough fixtures to come, including against Manchester City, who struggled at Southampton. And Alex Crook sat there on Saturday afternoon. He was on talkSPORT. He was with Troy Deeney. And after 10 minutes, he said, God, dear, this is going to be a riot. If they want to go up a couple of gears and score some goals, they can do what they want here, Manchester City. Well, they didn't. It ended up being 0-0. And not a great game of football either. Ruben Diaz was absolutely furious afterwards. He went on a rant suggesting that Southampton didn't bother to play football. But a little bit like the Enzo Maresca sort of explanation for why his team don't perform sometimes when he says, he says it constantly. He said it to me yesterday. Well, they set up in a way that they don't usually set up. Yeah, I know. That's kind of the job, right? So if I'm a manager who's trying to stop a good team, I will do something slightly different. And that's what Southampton did, Alex.
Yeah, they did. And the issue with that statement I made early on is that Manchester City never really did go up through the gears. It was a very laboured performance from them. Phil Foden, who is trying to play his way into a starting place in the FA Cup final, having been left on the bench for the semi-final, was non-existent again. I think you look at Kevin De Bruyne's performance and you understand why Manchester City didn't make any real effort to keep him, because I think his days as a top-level player are over. Erling Haaland played the whole game, but didn't look at all match fit or sharp. So interesting to see if he starts the FA Cup final. You assume he does, but it was only really when Marmoush came on that he injected any kind of urgency into that Manchester City attack. And I think Ruben Diaz has made himself look a bit stupid, to be honest, because you're asking a team who've got 11 points. They've conceded 80-odd goals over the course of the season. They were in very real danger of not going past Derby's record low points tally, because I think they'll lose at Goodison Park next weekend. And then they've got Arsenal at home on the last day. So this was a massive point for Southampton. Maybe, if you're being churlish, you can say that the celebrations for just getting to 12 points were a little bit tin pot. But it meant a lot to the players in that dressing room that they won't be labelled with being the worst team in Premier League history. And defensively, I thought they were terrific. The big question, if you're a Saints fan, is where's this attitude, application, willingness to put your body on the line been all season? Because they certainly would have had a lot more points and a lot less goals in the against column had they just shown the same determination not to concede.
Well, it underscores exactly what we've been saying ever since he was appointed, that Ivan Juric was a stupid appointment for Southampton because it was a completely different style to what they'd been used to. Simon Rusk has come in, along with Adam Lallana. They've made them a little bit more robust and they've been better. Okay, the pressure's off, they've already been relegated or whatever. But the fact is that they clearly, that what he was asking them to do, which was go man for man all over the pitch, was never going to suit this group of players. It was a poor decision by the hierarchy, who have made a number of poor decisions. Does Erling Haaland start the cup final, Darren Lewis?
No. In a word, I think Marmoush offers you more mobility, more options. He pulls defenders all over the place. I'm not so sure at the moment Haaland is sharp enough to do that. And, I mean, look, he's a fabulous weapon to be able to bring off the bench. But I just looked as though he was a bit of a passenger against Southampton of all teams. It's ridiculous. I mean, I can go and maybe try and get into the heads and contradict myself, considering I said that we're football reporters and not mind readers. But I just wonder if Pep's thinking was, it's only Southampton, no disrespect, and thought it would be a really ideal tune-up for a top striker to find his way back. But he was poor and he was predictable and he was snuffed out of the game. And really and truly, you would have expected more from him in that game. And if I'm Marmoush, given the impact I've made already, I know I've only just got through the door, but I'm a little bit disappointed if I'm not starting the cup final ahead of Haaland.
Okay, so the cup final is next Saturday, and as a result of that, Manchester City don't play again in the Premier League until the 20th of May. Now, by which time Chelsea and Villa should have won their games on Friday night, right? So they'll be above them in the table. That means that by the time they kick off against Bournemouth, they'll be out of the Champions League places. So the pressure will be on. And Bournemouth have already given them a couple of really good games in the FA Cup and in the Premier League this season, Crook. Is there a scenario that City don't qualify?
I think it's unlikely because I think they'll beat Bournemouth. I think this is a good time to be playing Bournemouth. But you know what? I was just looking at the odds here for the FA Cup final. City heavy odds on favourites. I fancy Palace. I really do. If City turn up and play like they did at St Mary's, Palace are going to have too much quality. And you look at the way that Palace tore Villa apart in the semi-final, I think there's genuine belief in that dressing room that they can do something special this season. So it wouldn't surprise me if they don't win the FA Cup, Manchester City. And in some ways, I think that would be quite befitting of the underwhelming season they've had. Likewise, do they really deserve Champions League football? When you look at the drop-off, and I know obviously Leicester sacked Ranieri after they won the title because they were suddenly in the bottom half of the table. Blackburn Rovers won the title and ended up getting relegated a few years later. But in
Chelsea under Mourinho.
Chelsea under Mourinho as well. But in terms of the top sides, I think this has been one of the most dramatic drop-offs. And I said also on air during the game on Saturday, this City team is still in need of a lot of surgery to get back to the heights they were at before.
Okay, so who makes top 5 then? Because there's quite a... Well, there's probably 5 teams now vying for it. Manchester City, Newcastle, Chelsea, Nottingham Forest and Aston Villa. Manchester City have Bournemouth and Fulham. Fulham is the away game, Bournemouth at home. Newcastle away to Arsenal, Everton at home. Chelsea, Manchester United at home and Nottingham Forest away, which could be a big decider. Nottingham Forest, West Ham away, Chelsea at home. Aston Villa, Tottenham at home and Manchester United away. I mean, in a sense, the Nottingham Forest-Chelsea fixture does add a little bit of skew to it because not both those teams can get maximum points. It's impossible. So the others are almost as a little bit of an advantage in a sense as a result of that, because one is not knocked out, but one obviously has points being taken away from them. So how do you see it? Darren?
I think the top 5 will be Liverpool, Newcastle, Arsenal, City and Villa. I think Chelsea and Forest will miss out. I think Newcastle will beat Arsenal, but Arsenal's saving grace is that they've got Southampton. But this renewed Southampton, where players are clearly playing for their futures under Simon Ruskell, I think might be given the job, given the way they've applied themselves in the last couple of games. I think they might be difficult for Arsenal in their final game. I think it's their final game, isn't it? And
St Mary's,
so I think Arsenal might take a point and finish third. I think as far as City are concerned, they've still got the firepower to finish in the top 4. And I think Villa will win each of those last 2 games against Spurs and Man United. Whereas if Newcastle beat Chelsea, that is going to be almost fatal for them. And Forest, they've lost their form completely. I just can't see them turning it around now.
Okay, so I've got Arsenal to get 3 more points, Manchester City to get 4 more points, Newcastle to get just 3 more points, Chelsea to get 3 more points, Nottingham Forest to get 3 more points, and Villa to get 6 more points. So after Darren Lewis depressing me, I'm going to depress myself and say that Arsenal finish 2nd, Newcastle 3rd, Manchester City 4th, Aston Villa 5th, Chelsea 6th, and Nottingham Forest 7th.
So you agree with me?
I do. Sort of, yeah, I do. But I think it'll be a lot tighter in terms of points. I've got a feeling that it's going to be very tight. Just 2 points will separate 4 teams, I think. Crook, give me some optimism. I mean, I can't convince myself. Darren can't convince me that Chelsea are going to get there. Can you convince me that Chelsea will make it just about, sneak in?
No, because I think Villa will win both their final games, and I think Chelsea will drop points at Forest. I'm interested actually to see what Ruben Amorim does with the Manchester United team before that Europa League final, because you need some momentum, and United have got none in the league at the moment. We're not talking about the game because it's irrelevant. It's 15th against 16th, but that was a disgrace of a performance from Manchester United on Saturday.
And his quotes afterwards frightened me a little bit, Crook, because he said, if it keeps going on like this, then I'll have to resign because I can't accept that the team are afraid of losing. So the idea that he's now trying to get them into a situation where they must win games and then they're going to Chelsea on Friday now makes me think that they're actually going to try. That's the disaster.
Yeah, and I think they need to try because, it's unacceptable to lose 17 of your 36 games in the Premier League
lose
season.
One more, just please.
But, what he was saying there, and I know Danny Murphy on television on Sunday night, construed it as, again, him being too negative. But he's only saying what most United fans have been thinking for some time. There's a group of players in that dressing room who don't have pride in the shirt. They don't understand how terminal it should be every time Manchester United lose a game. They're just used to it, particularly at home. And this is against a god-awful West Ham team who have turned up at Old Trafford and dominated the game. And you look at the United 11, it's not the under-15s he put out. There should be enough quality in that team. You look at people like Luke Shaw, who's a shadow of the player he once was. You look at Bruno Fernandes, who obviously has been a real driving force in the Europa League, but hasn't really been able to do that in the Premier League. You look at Kobbie Mainoo, who's gone so far backwards since starring for England at the Euros. It's frightening. You look at Rasmus Højlund, who, there's no accountability because he just misses chance after chance. He's playing up front for Manchester United. Whatever happens here, even if they somehow stumble to victory in the Europa League, it's been an absolute disaster of a season. And Amorim does have to get it right because the fans have stuck by and they've stuck by this rigid system. He needs a proper transfer window, get out some players that he clearly doesn't fancy, be that because of lack of ability or lack of mentality, get his own players in, but make no mistake about it that they can't be losing games at the start of next season with the regularity they are at the moment in the Premier League because he will get fired. And I do actually expect a response against Chelsea on Friday night. So you might be right. Maybe United can nick a draw there.
Crook, do you expect Ahmad and Fernandes, who are by a mile your two best players, to play in to start the next two games, or do you expect them to play minutes in the next two games, or do you expect them to be wrapped up in cotton wool? Because I cannot see that you'll win the Europa League without either of those players or both.
They've only got one game before the Europa League final, and that's Friday night's game against Chelsea,
course,
live on talkSPORT.
Well, Bruno Fernandes never seems to be rested, does he? So I would expect him to start. And I think Amad Diallo is still feeling his way back to full sharpness. So, yeah, I think he'll probably start the game as well. So I think it will be I think United's team at Chelsea is going to be stronger than the team that Tottenham send out against Aston Villa, which, again, is probably not great news for Sam.
If Fernandes and Ahmed, God forbid, were to play and be injured, would that be your hopes of winning it out the window?
Listen, do I have hopes of winning it? I'm absolutely petrified of this game, as both sets of supporters will be. Honestly, I don't think you can nail your colour to either mast with any great confidence, because between them, they've lost 37 Premier League games. But yes, it's imperative that Bruno Fernandes and Amad Diallo are fit.
That's quite amazing, isn't it? They've almost lost a season's worth of games together. That's some achievement, actually. And Spurs boss Ange Postecoglou, who doesn't really like doing post-match interviews, yesterday explained away the bad results that Tottenham have had. And they've contributed 20 of those league defeats that Crook is talking about, by the way, with the words, if we weren't in the Carabao Cup or in Europe, our results would have been better. No doubt that he's been hamstrung by injuries in a squad that hasn't been built with the assaults on three fronts in mind. But I do think, Darren, that he does himself a bit of a disservice with the way he sort of dismissively talks to journalists post-match. I'm sure he isn't a bad bloke deep down, and there's a lot of pressure that goes with being a Premier League manager, but that's why you get remunerated well, and that's why that you are in the position that you are. But these guys who are doing the post-match interviews, most people don't go to every Ange Postecoglou press conference or watch every single Tottenham game. I'm sure some of us do, and keep an eye on all of that, but you can be respectful to people. Tom Gale in the Match of the Day interview asked a legitimate question. It may not be the one that Ange Postecoglou wanted, but it doesn't take too much to be polite. I think he does himself a disservice.
I know Tom, and Tom is he's the nicest bloke you could wish to find, apart from you two. He just would not hurt a fly. He's not rude. He's not bombastic. And he's certainly not someone who would want to rub someone up the wrong way. So, yeah, look, if I was a mate of Ange ahead of next season, I would just take him for a lemonade, a mineral water or something and say, look, you're using up way too much energy fighting battles you don't need to be fighting. You clearly got a good body of work. If you win the Europa League and get Spurs into the Champions League, you're there. I have a huge amount of respect for Postecoglou because of his body of work and the fact that he's had to defy the doubters all the way to this point. And if he were to win the league, I know some people still would not be having it because that's just the way of the world. But for him, it would be a huge vindication of what he's trying to do to be able to operate at that level. And it really would take some doing for Spurs to sack a manager that's really defied the odds and got them into a competition, the elite European competition, that on the basis of their squad, their wage bill, the lack of investment, they've got no real right to be in. But I just wish he would maybe stop, maybe just use that energy where it should be with his players and their performances.
Yeah, I wonder whether or not he will survive. I've got a feeling that it's already sorted. I think Crook will sort of back me up on that. I don't actually think that people are against him. I actually think people have given him a relatively easy time because there is a little bit of good spirit towards him. This is a team that is 17th in the league. They've lost 20 games. The Europa League final is great, but they haven't been blowing people away during that competition. And it doesn't expunge your record. The record has been poor over the course of the last 18 months, Crook.
Yeah, I mean, there's not much goodwill here because I've been on the receiving end of a couple of those, dismissive replies to questions as you have, and I think he's handled himself very poor PR-wise, and I think he's become the king of excuses. You know, if you're manager of a big football club, which Tottenham aspire to be, you're going to be competing on multiple fronts. That comes with the territory. So to use success in cup competitions, if you can call getting battered in the second leg of a semi-final at Anfield and sneaking into Europe's second-tier competition final success as an excuse for underperforming the league, I don't think sits well. I think if you speak to most Tottenham fans now, they're ready for a change. That they think the league form is so bad that he can't possibly stay. And I do think it's already decided. I think Paratici is going to come back in and have a big say. My information is that he wasn't necessarily on board with the Postecoglou appointment in the first place. So I think it's inevitable that win or lose in Bilbao, Ange Postecoglou won't be Tottenham manager at the start of next season.
Okay. Crookmeister, thank you very much. And Darren Lewis, it's always lovely to see you. We've kept you on and we've extended the podcast because we just love listening to your velvet voice. And I'm just going to go, after this, I've got a couple of days off. I'm just going to go and prepare for the cup final by just listening to your little bits over and over again. We'll see you soon. Thank you very much. We'll be back later in the week to preview the FA Cup final and the Premier League games as well, because there's quite a few of them that are surrounding that FA Cup final. So we've got Friday night games and Sunday games this week to bring you on talkSPORT. So stick around, and if you want to interact with any of the bits and pieces that we've produced, remember the talkSPORT app has got all of the podcasts. It's got some of the best bits in terms of video, so you can watch and listen to shows on that as well. So download it and you will have entertainment for your heart's content.